hear them talking. Another world is not just necessary, but it's also possible. That is the title of the speech by Fikrejesus Amahazion. He is a professor at the National College of Arts and Social Science at Eritrea. He works as a researcher in around various different developments in his country at the Horn of Africa. And his focus is on African development, human rights, political economy. Apart from teaching, Amahazion also regularly publishes articles on current events. In the last year, he published on child mortality in Eritrea in his book of mortality in Eritrea, child mortality in Eritrea. And this gives us a sense of the facts of the Eritrean health care system in terms of how it impacts on children, and it calls for the responsibility for the child welfare to be distributed on the shoulders of the entire community. He says, another world is not just necessary, but also possible. Thank you very much.
Okay. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Jung Welt and the various organizers for the invitation and opportunity to attend this wonderful gathering. It is truly a special privilege and a deep honor. Since arriving in your beautiful country and at this special conference, I have met some amazing people and been thoroughly impressed with all that I have taken in. Trust, my attendance here alongside you all in this historic city is something that I will cherish always and remember with great fondness. Again, thank you. Today, I have been invited to share some comments about development in Eritrea, a topic that tends to be misunderstood, loaded with myriad misconceptions, and encumbered by dreadful inaccuracies. It is my profound hope that my commentary, shared in the spirit of sincere respect and solidarity, can shed revelatory light, offer a semblance of clarity, and provide useful insight, while also positively contributing to the instructive, enlightening discussions that are unfolding across the duration of this conference. In thinking about how African countries are covered within Western mainstream media, what one quickly comes to realize is that they largely aren't. Instead, they are generally overlooked or ignored. However, in terms of the small body of coverage that does exist, African countries are portrayed, discussed, and analyzed in a manner that leaves a lot to be desired. Indeed, much ought to be improved. Africa, a huge country, a huge continent, home to 54 countries, over 1 billion people, numerous ethno-linguistic groups, over 2,000 languages, and enormous complexity, is more often than not overgeneralized and reduced to what Reinhold Niebuhr once called emotionally potent oversimplifications. Invariably, it is painted with a crude brush and broad strokes, while commonly being spoken about as if it was a homogeneous, uniform entity or a monolithic unit. What is more, coverage of Africa remains largely fixated on an extremely narrow circle of topics: rampant corruption, debilitating poverty, drought and famine, savage, senseless conflicts, hordes of migrants at the gates, and terrorism. There is hardly ever any nuance or context within stories and analyses, while triumphs, progress, and positive developments across the continent, of which there are certainly many, tend to be wholly disregarded or not afforded the level and depth of attention that they genuinely merit. In disconcerting echoes of the past, the language and tone used still present African countries as perennially inconsequential and lacking significant global import. it seems that some remain utterly unable to accept the basic fact that Africans have agency and they can, actually often do, find creative answers, develop effective solutions, and produce things of considerable merit. Africa is framed as feeble, dependent, and an eternal hapless victim in need of saving, with the prevailing narrow-minded and flatly wrong conventional wisdom suggesting that no problems can be solved, that no challenges or obstacles can be surmounted, that no true progress can be made unless it is external, specifically Western, actors that are doing the planning, directing, and implementing. Of course, this troubling affliction is not limited solely to the Western mainstream media. It is also highly prevalent and deeply rooted within the West's political structures, the hallowed ivory towers of academia, and other institutions. It is still vividly fresh in the memory how Donald Trump crassly denigrated a collection of African and other global South countries as shithole countries. And lest anyone is tempted to blithely dismiss those comments as the racist ramblings of an uncouth, eccentric, loose cannon, Josep Borrell, Europe's senior-most diplomat, abhorrently compared Europe to a beautiful, serene garden and the world to a jungle, while also suggesting that African countries that fail to fall perfectly in line with the West's stance on the Russia-Ukraine crisis were devoid of minimal intelligence. Here, it is worth noting that when it comes to African countries, mainstream media and leading institutions seem to only hold up Westerners as experts and authoritative voices, although these individuals frequently cannot speak the languages of or have never actually set foot on the continent. At the same time, sad and astonishing, they unwaveringly persist in platforming these individuals as preeminent experts and authorities, despite the fact that they boast a long track record of only highly flawed assessments and analyses disconnected from reality and wildly inaccurate predictions. Meanwhile, thoroughly qualified and highly experienced individuals from across Africa are rarely looked to for their views or analyses of their own countries, let alone the West. Ultimately, the result of this multi-level framework and line of approach is tired clichés, nauseating stereotypes, facile assumptions, and gross distortions that fail to provide an even vaguely accurate or somewhat reliable account of the countries of the continent or their objective on-the-ground realities. Sadly, we are left with a deep lack of clarity, at times shocking levels of ignorance, and vast lacuna in understanding about Africa, its people, its history, and its ongoing circumstances. This is the contextual backdrop for my comments today, as everything that I have just mentioned, the grossly distorted narrative, the demonization and dehumanizing, the rigid paternalistic framing, and the patronizing condescension has been a defining characteristic of coverage and analysis about Eritrea. To be sure, allow me to underscore that my aim today is not to offer a glowing encomium to Eritrea or to suggest that it is completely beyond reproach or criticism. It is not. The country, like all others around the world, has many faults and is confronted by numerous significant challenges and demanding concerns. And like all countries and political spaces worldwide and throughout history, it is incredibly complex. However, along the lines of the African novelist Chimamanda Adichie's cautionary articulations about the weighty dangers of a single story, there are also many other dimensions to Eritrea, far beyond the harshly negative, sensationalized depiction that remains front, center, and overwhelmingly dominant. The pursuit of deeper understanding, the search for collective sense-making, the quest for advancing knowledge necessitates moving beyond rigidity and acknowledging that there is good, worth, and dignity everywhere in this world. As rightly put by Bhikkhu Parekh, No culture has a monopoly on wisdom. No culture embodies all the great values. And therefore, each country has a great deal to learn from others through dialogue. Thus, in contrast to romanticizing Eritrea, my comments actually serve to problematize the long-standing flawed narrative and slanted, accepted portrayal about the country with a particular focus on development. As I begin, perhaps it is useful to offer an introductory overview. Possessing a rich, immensely complex history, a colorful blend of beautiful cultures, and lively, vibrant diversity, Eritrea is one of the world's youngest countries. In 1991, after waging one of the longest, loneliest national wars for liberation in modern African history, and following tens of thousands of deaths, numerous more injuries, and complete destruction, Eritrea, terribly outmanned, massively outgunned, globally ignored, and seemingly against all logic, defeated Africa's largest, best-equipped army, and finally won its freedom. Located in the turbulent Horn of Africa, straddling one of the globe's key geostrategic regions, Eritrea is a relatively small country bordered by Djibouti, Sudan, and Ethiopia. It has a long, pristine coastline on the Red Sea, spanning well over 3,000 kilometers, among the lengthiest in Africa. Mainly arid and semi-arid, receiving very little and erratic rainfall, Eritrea has 6 political administrative regions, which vary substantially in terms of their respective size, population, biodiversity, geography, and socioeconomic conditions. The population is approximately 3.6 million people, with about 40% under 15 years of age, thus presenting significant potential for a demographic dividend in the years ahead. Eritrea's people fall into 9 separate ethno-linguistic groups and are split almost evenly between Christianity and Islam, with each representing nearly half of the population. Almost 2/3 of Eritreans currently live in rural areas, although urbanization is increasing. At present, Eritrea is classified as a low-income developing country, and while economic growth has been characterized by considerable volatility in past years, there is a relatively positive outlook for the near to mid-term. The economy is largely based on subsistence, rain-fed agriculture, and pastoralism, while mining has emerged as an increasingly significant sector, now accounting for the majority of FDI and exports. Other areas holding sizable promise include manufacturing, tourism, and the blue economy. Past the sensationalized headlines and diametrically opposed to the raft of misguided assumptions, Eritrea has managed to register important developmental progress in a number of different areas. For example, in terms of child mortality, regarded by health experts worldwide as an effective proxy indicator for overall child health and well-being, Eritrea has dramatically improved from 146 deaths per 1,000 live births in 1991 to 38 in 2021. Placing that into better context, it has moved from having one of the worst under 5 mortality rates anywhere on the planet to now being among the leaders on the continent and within the broader developing world. Notably, Eritrea's average annual rate of reduction across the period is around 4.5%, one of the fastest in the world. My longitudinal analysis exploring these tremendous gains in depth based on a multi-methodological research approach and published in a book published last year, found that there is no single cause that accounts for the country's success in reducing child mortality. Instead, Eritrea's substantial progress, which interestingly has gone largely unrecognized within media and scholarship, has been driven by a mix of factors that cut across several sectors. These include, inter alia, high-level political will and commitment, female education, and expansion of access to healthcare and services. Another driving factor has been routine childhood vaccination, a simple, cost-effective intervention that has helped prevent serious illness, disability, and death caused by a range of dangerous, debilitating diseases. At independence, there were only 6 vaccines available for children, and the nation's coverage rate stood at less than 10%. Across subsequent years, however, the routine vaccination program has steadily grown. Today, Eritrea administers 14 vaccines, with national coverage rates being nearly universal in the high 90s, which is significantly higher than both the continental and global average. Notably, during an extended working visit to Eritrea in late 2021, Mohamed Malik Fall, UNICEF's Regional Director for East and Southern Africa, explained that he was struck by the level of immunization of children in Eritrea, before going on to note that there are many advanced countries that have a hard time reaching those coverage levels. Eritrea has also greatly reduced maternal mortality, which remains a terrible blight on the globe's collective conscience. According to UNICEF and the UNDP, it once had the highest maternal mortality ratio in the entire world, with more than 1,500 maternal deaths per 100,000 live births. Yet today, it is among the best on the continent, with less than 200 deaths, and is currently projected to achieve the associated UN Sustainable Development Goal target. Additionally, through a series of high-impact interventions and a comprehensive multi-sectoral approach, remarkable success has been achieved in halting the spread of HIV, which continues to be one of the world's greatest tragedies. To be exact, the country has sustained a long-term decline in prevalence and incidence, with the former now standing at 0.4% and the latter at a minuscule 0.06. Again, these improvements have seen Eritrea climb precipitously from having some of the worst figures on the planet to now being categorized as among the best in Africa and the wider developing world. What's more, in terms of malaria, the deadliest of all mosquito-borne diseases, the country is steadily transitioning from pre-elimination towards elimination status. In fact, its record in terms of prevention, reduction, and control stand up formidably well against that of the international development and aid industrial complex, which one must remember has drawn hundreds of millions of dollars in financing and been far more publicized. Alongside all of this, major inroads have been made against an array of developing world scourges, including, among others, tuberculosis, hepatitis B, and neglected tropical diseases, while life expectancy has soared from less than 50 at independence to above 67 last year, a steep upward trajectory positively distinguished from many others on the continent. Another area of noteworthy progress has been within education, universally regarded as a fundamental human right, a pivotal catalyst for inclusive socioeconomic growth and broad-based development, and as declared by Mandela, the most powerful weapon one can use to change the world. Historically, education in Eritrea was in dire straits, being restricted to only an extremely thin, select sliver of the population, while enrollment and literacy were pitifully low. During Italian colonization, the policy toward locals was to keep the Eritrean's belly filled while keeping his brain empty. While in the mid-1970s, amidst Eritrea's fight for freedom, approximately 95% of Eritrean women were illiterate, with males only marginally better off. However, recent decades have witnessed gargantuan strides made. Within both urban and rural areas, hundreds of new schools, learning centers, and libraries have been built, as older ones have been markedly renovated or upgraded. The number of schools at all levels has multiplied from just over 500 in 1991 to nearly 2,300 last year, with many more currently under planning or in the process of being constructed. As a result, capacity has been expanded, overcrowding greatly reduced, and total enrollments have been raised from less than 250,000 in 1992 to around 700,000 last year. Parallel to these advancements, literacy has also been improved, with adult literacy jumping from less than 50% to about 80%, while youth literacy has shot up from about 60% to 93%. According to UNESCO's Institute for Statistics, Eritrea's increases in youth literacy are not just positively distinguished worldwide, they are among the largest anywhere in the world over the past 50 years. In other areas of development, there has been respectable improvement in building infrastructure, expanding the national roads network, reducing poverty, raising agricultural production and productivity, and ensuring food and nutrition security. Likewise, access to electricity, sanitation, and hygiene, among other critical services, have been expanded with notable expansions in rural and hard-to-reach areas. Of note, clean water access has also sharply risen. Currently, it is above 85% nationwide, compared to a mere 13% just 3 decades ago. Well worth mentioning, too, is that Eritrea's cultural contributions are rich in the fields of music and art, while its achievements in athletics relative to the size of its population and national wealth are outstanding and have yielded consistently impressive performances in regional and global competitions in recent years. Among the most inspiring areas of advancement has been in gender equality and empowerment. In Eritrea, like much of the rest of the world, it has historically been the tradition, indeed the rigid rule, that women and girls are regarded as inferior and considered as having little of major substance to contribute to their communities or wider society. As one old, backwards local saying states, like there is no donkey with horns, there is no woman with brains. But from the days of the protracted bitter armed struggle and larger social revolution, and especially in the years since the momentous achievement of national independence, Eritrea's girls and women have proven themselves to be immensely strong and doggedly resilient exceptions to outdated patriarchal rules. Reflecting agency, empowerment, and initiative, they have been tangibly contributing within all areas of society and in many diverse, important ways, ultimately playing a vital role in families, communities, the nation's socio-economic improvement, and its general development. To adapt the words of the late John Lewis, without its gallant women, Eritrea would be a bird without wings. The panoply of developments that I have briefly traced, some striking, are a sample of a larger body of significant progress. Although they merit genuine appreciation and respect in and of themselves, they are also doubly remarkable, further laudable, and especially insightful because of the broader context of daunting obstacles and huge challenges within which they were accomplished. For one, even though Eritrea accounts for among the smallest global shares of total global greenhouse gas emissions, it, like Africa and the global south more widely, is directly on the intensely raging front lines of the rapidly unfolding climate change crisis. The country has increasingly been confronted by a multitude of climate-related hazards and extreme shocks, such as recurrent and extended droughts, flooding and storms, high dangerous winds, especially within coastal areas, and tremendously destructive locust swarms. Compounding the sheer injustice, the enormously wealthy and tiny minority of the world's countries and corporations, overwhelmingly responsible for these devastating crises, the lead authors of the tragedy, have abjectly neglected to honor their commitments and moral obligations to extend appropriate compensation for immense losses and damages incurred, or adequate assistance toward mitigation and adaptation measures. A second major challenge has been the ruinous conflicts, instability, and widespread insecurity that have perennially stalked the Horn of Africa. While a bevy of factors, internal and external, historic and contemporary, have underlain the vortex of harrowing strife, horrific turmoil, and seemingly perpetual anguish, no part of the region has been left untouched or unaffected as a result of spillover effects, closely shared histories, and other pertinent linkages or dynamics. Last, Eritrea has been the victim of a brutal, drawn-out war of aggression and a lengthy military occupation extending across vast swaths of its sovereign territory. These actions, waged by the belligerent, expansionist previous Ethiopian regime, were directly aimed at effecting a violent, extra-legal change of government in Asmara and forcibly annexing most of the highlands and large parts of the eastern lowlands of Eritrea. Although constituting flagrant and grave violations of the core tenets of international law and the UN Charter, the previous Ethiopian regime's unrelenting hostility and aggression toward Eritrea, along with its long-running military occupation of Eritrean lands, were unconditionally and comprehensively supported by the West, to the tune of tens of billions of dollars and strident diplomatic backing within various international fora, without a scintilla of compunction and in direct return for its unquestioning subservience as a regional proxy. Parallel to this, Eritrea has also withstood years of grueling sanctions and a toxic combination of coercive economic measures. The Prussian general and military theorist Clausewitz famously stated that war is the continuation of politics by other means. In the Eritrean case, sanctions and associated strong-arm measures, many of which continue unabated to this very day, have been the extension of war by other methods. Principally engineered and led by the US, with its small collection of faithful allies in tow, the assorted coercive economic measures have been, to their fundamental core, highly politicized and wielded as blunt measures to cow, intimidate, and isolate. They are severe, prolonged, and systematic violations of international law and the UN Charter. They infringe upon Eritrea's rights to sovereignty, self-defense, and development, and they reflect a stunning degree of moral bankruptcy. Regarding development, for instance, restrictions have extended to blocking the importation of motor pumps for water and electrical schemes, as well as computers and technical systems used in the health sector and other areas. Shipping freight costs have been hiked up, while Eritrea has been forced to charter planes to import life-saving medical supplies, since many carriers have refused deliveries due to fear of cooperating with the sanctioned nation. As well, Eritrea has been blocked from SWIFT, a cooperative international payment system which is the financial artery of the global economy, thus severely disrupting trade and economic activities. The numerous and variegated detrimental impacts across various sectors have been heavily compounded by unceasing efforts to prevent legitimate remittance transactions by Eritreans living abroad, thwart the nation's receipt of valuable investments or requests for lines of credit, and force the closure of Eritrea's diplomatic missions. In the face of this extraordinary adversity, that Eritrea has been able to move forward at all, even if at times haltingly, falteringly, or stumbling, rather than totally collapsing or getting completely derailed from its pursuit of national development and nation building, is somewhat audacious. Not only does it represent a powerful, resounding testament of the indomitable spirit and indefatigable resilience of Eritrea's people, it also serves as a deep reservoir of strength and profound inspiration for what is possible in the future. Having laid out some of Eritrea's developmental progress, allow me to now highlight several key principles upon which development and nation building are anchored. The first is social justice and equality. Across the past 3 decades, Eritrea has crafted a broad spectrum of policies, adopted a variety of legal instruments, and established an array of initiatives to help address the specific needs of and catalyze progress for historically marginalized and vulnerable groups, such as the poor, women, children, persons living with disabilities, nomadic populations, and those residing in extremely remote or hard-to-reach areas. There are many vivid examples of this devotion to leaving no one behind. One is the mother language teaching policy, which mandates multilingual education based on the mother language from pre-primary until the end of elementary level. This is an important tool for preserving culture and tradition in Eritrea's highly diverse society. It also helps to increase access and ensure inclusive, quality education for all, particularly through reducing dropout rates, improving academic results, fluency, and literacy, and leading to greater family and community involvement. Another illustration is the minimum integrated household agricultural package. Recall that Eritrea is a primarily rural country, with agriculture remaining the mainstay of livelihoods for a large percentage of the population. Through this support scheme, rural households receive dozens of animals, along with beehives, trees, land, improved seeds, and regular support with modern inputs and management. Since its commencement, thousands of households, many poor and headed by women, have been reached, ultimately promoting food and nutrition security, reducing poverty and inequality, and ensuring that more families are able to lead lives of dignity. There are many other examples beyond these two, including the fact that healthcare and education across all levels are delivered free, the extended learning and adult literacy program, school feeding and material distribution initiatives, microcredit and loans programs, and the abolishment of harmful traditional practices. On top of being a moral imperative, Eritrea's multifaceted social justice efforts and interventions help mitigate gaping historical disparities, create a level playing field on which all citizens have a genuine opportunity to excel, and seek to ensure that each and every individual, regardless of background or distinction, is empowered and able to enjoy the fruits of inclusive socioeconomic growth and social progress. They are important for another crucial reason as well. Specifically, they play a critical role in cultivating peace, fostering unity, and strengthening cohesion within the country's multi-ethnic, multi-faith, multicultural society. Indeed, its ability to unite and cohere across ethnic, linguistic, religious, and other lines has been one of Eritrea's chief achievements, as well as a central element in many of its developmental successes. Should anyone be under any illusions about the far-reaching importance of this particular dynamic, they need only quickly scan the plethora of compelling empirical studies or momentarily survey the tragic, blood-drenched history of many neighboring countries, surrounding regions, or even the world for further clarity. Briefly, group-based inequalities and marginalization have frequently served to stoke social tensions or unrest, unleash devastating violence or conflagrations, and ignite interminable havoc. Another guiding principle of development and nation building in Eritrea is self-reliance, which entails domestic efforts to develop, strengthen, and expand the country's capacity to plan, finance, and implement long-term, sustainable, and inclusive solutions to local development challenges. Unfortunately, Eritrea's unconventional approach to external aid and international cooperation is one of the most misunderstood and misrepresented aspects about the country. To be clear, the country does not outrightly reject aid, nor is it opposed to external support or cooperation. And, contrary to misguided headlines or myopic analyses, it is not isolationist. Rather, it actively welcomes and encourages aid and assistance, but only when they truly complement the country's own efforts, align with its needs, and fit with its capacity to use effectively. Over the years, Eritrea has encouraged and received a plethora of aid and assistance, originating from a wide range of international friends and partners that addresses specific, well-defined needs which cannot be met internally, which is designed to minimize and eventually eliminate continued external support, and which complements and strengthens instead of replacing Eritrea's own institutional capacity to implement projects. For Eritrea, engagement and relations with international partners are a fundamental issue of basic dignity. They should be based on equality and mutual respect. They must be truly cooperative partnerships and not based on hierarchical frameworks or paternalistic prescription and dictation of unsuitable antidotes, while the country's autonomy of decision-making should not be encroached upon by conditionalities. This unique perhaps heterodox approach is deeply rooted in Eritrea's long struggle for independence, which was largely self-reliant, with much of the international community completely ignoring or actively working against the freedom movement. Furthermore, the country has a strong desire to avoid the terribly crippling, debilitating dependency that has become synonymous with aid across the continent. At the same time, it strives to encourage the initiative of Eritreans and foster a clear sense of agency and responsibility for the country's future among all citizens. A major irony, indeed a tragic calamity of African history, is that so many of the theories, policies, and solutions employed across the continent have emanated from far outside the continent. Quite simply, no other region of the world has been so dominated by external ideas and models. The reality is that while external cooperation and support can be highly valuable, solutions and approaches grounded in domestic realities and contexts, with the reins firmly owned and tightly grasped by locals, often prove to be more effective and robust than those simply cut out, pasted, and imposed from other parts of the world. In ending, the Eritrean case is tremendously interesting, extremely enlightening, and offers myriad useful insights. I would hope that much of what I have discussed today suggests that there are many more chapters to the story about Eritrea than have hitherto been shared. Not only is this thought-provoking in itself, it demonstrates that a broader range of voices and perspectives ought to be encouraged, both to promote constructive dialogue and ultimately enrich overall understanding. What is more, Eritrea's story should matter to all concerned about Africa, as it adds significant layers to the broader discourse and debate about how the continent, having been oppressed and browbeaten by external forces for so long, can finally begin to stand up. Looking forward, much hard work remains. There is a long, winding, and surely bumpy road ahead. There are still numerous and arduous obstacles to be surmounted. Yet, this should not be a cause for fear or trepidation. Instead, may it be a clarion call for renewed commitment, greater efforts, and increased solidarity. As we say in Eritrea, awet nafash, victory to the masses.